Episode 34.
Hello.
Good thinking.
I'm back.
Yeah, you're around the world and back.
I'm back in Europe anyway There's no podcast next week because I'm going away for my birthday, but I am back in Europe.
Yes. 40th birthday. So happy birthday wishes.
Yes. All right, let's dive in. You have a good topic this week, I feel like.
I do. So there's a bunch of really interesting things to dig into. And I know your recommendation was around the toilet wellness trend, which I'm fucking fascinated by. And obviously, like, I want one stat in my bathroom, but that's not what I want to dig into. I couldn't stop thinking about it as I went to sleep last night. There were different parts and pieces of the newsletter that really stood out to me, but it really came back to really talking about the Olympics, really honing in on the Paralympics. I know you have a lot of feelings, a lot of ideas. We've talked a lot about a lot of things. I think the non-alcoholic piece regarding tennis hit me into it. And then the link that you included on Ezra happens to be somebody that I know his parents. And he's just an amazing, amazing human. And yesterday at the beach, my friends and I were watching a video of him win gold. And so I couldn't get this out of my mind, how inspiring, how amazing, how all of the things, and really want to talk about the opportunities that are there around Paralympics, certainly Olympics too, but coming to LA, coming to our backyard in 4 years and getting some thoughts, some ideas, and sharing some things.
Yes. Let's do it. I have lots of feelings, as you know. I know. My number one feeling, and if you read the letter, then you know that this feeling is there, is I just think that it's still like not, the Paralympics is amazing, and it's just not like showing up necessarily, I think, in people's feeds the way that, and in people's hearts and minds and in the news. And there are campaigns, but the campaigns are all like rah-rah, like, we shouldn't, winning is winning, which is a lovely message, but it's always like we are other still. And it's just like, I just feel like there is a moment where we need to shift from how these people have overcome these really difficult things to, wow, these people are amazing athletes, like better athletes than you, me, and like 99% of the world. And why is it 2 weeks apart? Like, that would also be part of my question. Like, why is it even separated? That is a big question for me. Like, I feel like if it were, like, I don't, like, and granted, like, I'm coming as an outsider's perspective, right? But my outsider's perspective on this is that I don't understand why it would be, like, it's like a segregation.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And in this day and age, it feels like we should be past all of that. It just feels silly. And I think in a lot of ways, and again, watching Ezra yesterday, watching the video of it, Paralympians have had to conquer even more challenges. So there's, like, to me, even more inspiration when they get the gold or when they do this or when there's some amazing feat, because there's something else in addition, going on with them. And just to, like, watch that and how inspiring that is, I just think is beyond.
Completely. And I think that most people now realize, like, a lot of people, whether they have physical disabilities or mental difficulties or like, like cognitive disabilities, like there's a lot on the spectrum of like people dealing and overcoming. And I think that that is a message that I think people are very ready to experience, right? Like to be inspired by. I think it's just this pause that happens. It's like a timeout in terms of the energy. And I think it is a disservice to them. Like, I think it's supposed to be, like a re-energizing moment. But to me, it feels like a deflating balloon that you're then trying to reinflate. And it feels like, I don't know if they're changing that in LA. For sure, I feel like even if they don't change that formatting piece of it, changing how brands show up, like how people show up in a more integrated way, I think could be really amazing.
Totally. So opportunity for them to really be ultimately combined, and obviously they can have kind of the different events, but I think that would be really interesting. And if not, like maybe there is some really more inspirational handoff versus like a pause and then starting again. But talking about brands and moving into that, like what is the opportunity for brands that's going to be different to really show up, to really be a part of it? Because I think there's so many things that you've kind of hit on that you and I have talked about. What's the lowest hanging fruit from a brand standpoint of getting in there?
Lowest hanging fruit, I think, is understanding the landscape of LA. They're going to have some events in Encino, which is basically, I mean, if you're from LA, you know where that is. It's way above Topanga. Like, we're talking
far,
like way up. Like, that is not central to LA whatsoever. They're going to have, you know, stuff in downtown, but downtown is actually like not as small as one, and it's not currently super connected. Moving from one side of downtown, from the convention center to the Coliseum, is like sweat inducing. So I would say, like, for brands, as the lowest hanging fruit thing is to understand where the sports will be competing where, and picking your battle, because I think that is going to be the way to win. Like, if you are a skate audience, you're going to be up in Encino. Like, if you, like, so the BMXers, all those people, like, they're all the way up there. So if you're Converse or you're, like, you know, a brand that's into that kind of sport, know where you're going. I would say that was, like, be the lowest hanging fruit piece. But I think also, like, being the bridge and the interconnector. Like, I don't know if Uber's on this, but, like, I would say, like, there is no, like, great I'm sure they're trying to work on it, but we only got 4 years left, and I can tell you it's not right. It's not there right now. Like, Paris had the Bateau Mouche. It had, like, some infrastructure there. It has a pretty good subway system. They were fairly, like, from what I understand, like, things were relatively, like, there was, like, the stade, where, like, the stadium and, like, most things were kind of located in one spot. And they had, like, a perimeter of, like, events, and that's where you could buy alcoholic drinks in the perimeter and then non-alcoholic drinks inside of the stade. And they had, like, it was just tighter. And I think that there's no way that LA will be so tight, but to be a connector of those things could be really amazing place for a brand. I think to know where you're going is a very basic thing. And then I think to just, like, really show up, like, in a way that feels bigger. Like, I think I loved, so Lego, like, sponsored the Bateau Mouche, right? Mm-hmm. So they chose themselves as the connector, which I love, because, like, their brand is a bunch of connection pieces, right? So, like, so smart to, like, in my head, make that connection.
Totally.
But yeah, I'd love to hear what you think. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think in talking about it and thinking about, we looked at the map briefly, concern for, like, things, they're going to have to be kind of villages around these moments, because LA is not a walkable city. Even in those two locations that are downtown, you're not going to walk from one to the other. It's just not the way it works. It's not the way the landscape is. And I'm all for walking anywhere. So it's not really going to be possible. So is it like, okay, so your commitment is to go to that particular place where you're going for the day, and then there's kind of going to need to be a village, a whole experience around that particular place, which I think is where it's going to go. But I think then you're going to lose, right? If all of the BMX and kind of the skateboarding and all of that is in the valley, you know, and that's going to be that vibe. And then my concern would be, like, well, I love it being really honed in and a bit dialed in on really what the experience can be. Don't want it to feel segregated, you know, so that it feels like this particular vibe is over here and you can only get that here. But then this particular vibe is downtown, and that's going to be totally different. Because I just think the combining of those two, certainly in the same day, of going from one to the other, is just, like, not going to happen.
No, you're never going
to. A shit
show.
You're
never going to. No, you wouldn't, as a consumer, want consumers to do that. That sounds horrible. I think also, like, let's talk about heat. Like, Encino.
It's gonna be hot as fuck. Fans.
Summer.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, like, I'm talking, like, really low-hanging fruit stuff. Like, walking through downtown is going to be hot. As, like, Paris is, like, warm in the summer, and it was hot. Like, it was relatively cool this summer. It rained a ton. And I think that was another thing. Like, nobody was able to take advantage of that because they didn't plan for it. But, like, had somebody owned, like, inclement weather, like, that would have been a major win. So I think there's a lot. And then I think, like, also, like, you know, it's interesting. In Paris, I think the audience was a good part French and a good part tourist, right? I think that in LA, you are going to have a lot of people from LA want to go. more than in Paris.
Totally.
I think there's going to be
that's
like
interesting.
everyone and their mother from LA will want to go. And then everyone else will want to go, right? Like it's a real destination. So I think like there's a couple of opportunities that I can see too with that is like, think about where people are going to be staying if they're planning on going to those two locations. There's very few places that are in between there. People are going to pick and choose one. They're either going to stay in downtown. There's a number of hotels, or they're just going to pick like being on the west side because they want to be near the beach. And like you could also activate over there. So I think like there's going to be a lot of opportunities for brands, but like you will have to be kind of like really thinking through like, who are you as a brand? Like, are you for the tourist? Are you for the LA person who's like from LA and like really like, yes, this is our moment to shine. And that could be another opportunity to like really lean into like, LA is very diverse and like got a huge, enormous population, but it's also a very diverse population of people. So I think like, how do you represent that city like in a different way? And then like, how do you show up and show respect for that city? I think would be really like, it'll be challenging for brands.
But I think that's a huge opportunity for brands. Like as you're talking about, West Side, and there's so many iconic, especially when it comes to sport, so many kind of iconic LA like aspects of it, right? Whether it's a venue, whether it's like Venice skate park, right? Like obviously it's not big enough to hold any kind of Olympics, crowds, but there's something that's really iconic. So is there some type of activation that a great brand can do? Well, everybody's kind of in town and a part of that. And then I think surfing is going to be down in the OC. Is there some opportunity where you're bringing kind of that vibe and that energy that is iconic to California, that's iconic to LA, and you're taking a brand that's really combined with that and you're bringing that out in its best light versus it just feeling like, okay, well, we're busing everybody over to X venue to like get out of the buses, kind of like a Disneyland vibe. Like hopefully it's a little bit more integrated because there's so many great aspects of LA and great aspects of the city. I think like Paris, how do you really bring out those iconic moments and tie them back into the game and tie them back into the experience? That I would love to see.
Yeah. And I do think they are improving the subway system, like, and have been working on that for a long time, like, because they've known about this. I mean, I wouldn't call it a subway. It's not a subway. It's a above ground rail. But like, again, I think like, being the person that like some of those stops, like hopefully they're renovating them, but like some of them are not like the chicest place that you want to be. And like, that's an opportunity for a brand to show up, and like people from LA will really appreciate it because they know that it's been bad. And then if you do it well, then people from out of town would also appreciate it just by virtue of it being nicer. Consider it your public service. So yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity. Like, I do think also a lot of retail brands will activate, like, in their own retail spaces. Like, I don't think, like that was definitely happening. Like Foot Locker did a big thing in Paris with like all of their locations, and like you could get certain like special swag for different, like you could kind of collect them. And so it was encouraging you to go like kind of all over the city, but also go to all the Foot Lockers. And I think like that type of thing will also could work in LA. I think, as somebody who hasn't lived in America forever, I do know like now that I'm gone too, like the first place I go is Target. Like the first place. Like I just miss Target so much. It's like insane. And
great.
It's just so handy. They just have so much nice stuff that you just can't get. And then you go to all these other things. But like Target, like I'm hoping that they like really like own this show. Like they've got a lot of locations in all of these things. They could do something really cool. I think there's, like again, like all the sports brands, I think there's a lot of opportunity to kind of connect the city for people, make it desirable, air conditioning lounge comes to mind.
Right.
Anyway, I think there's a lot. I mean, parking lots honestly come to mind. Activating and doing something where you have a nice parking situation. Like if there's a car brand, charging stations, like all of these things. Yeah. Like there's just, LA is so different to Paris and it's so much less established in its connectivity and so car reliant that I think it'll be such a different experience. Like people will also be spending a ton of time in between the moving to like here. So like, I think there was another opportunity there. And with the downtime, like, is there a way to like make downtime fun? Like, you know, pull a Chinese highway thing and like pull up with tacos while you're sitting in the traffic jam on the way to Encino. Like, and, you know, like that type of thing. So
Chinese fire drill. I love it. I love it.
Well, no, like on the Chinese highways, there are people who deliver food to you in your car because you're stuck in the traffic jam with your car, and they come with their little, like, their scooters, and they like zip by, and then they bring you your food like in your car.
I love it. We need that and maybe some road rage therapy in LA. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah.
I do think basing it on the experience, I think there's such opportunity, because there's such opportunity in like things like another 4 years, it's still not going to be as dialed in as one would hope. It's just the infrastructure isn't there necessarily. So I think it's going to be really hard. But I think taking those elements, seeing where the opportunity is and just making them better versus trying to add on and I'm going to create this whole new thing, like really dialing in those experiences, people would really notice and appreciate. And I think that would go a long way in brand loyalty and brand appreciation. I'm just really excited to see, I think it's like a leveling up to see how all of the stores, whether it's on Abbot Kinney, whether it's in, you know, Melrose or whatever it may be, to really see how they're going to kind of come to life and really present, because it's such an opportunity, it's such an audience. And I agree with you. I think it's going to be a lot of LA and it's going to be a lot of out of town, but I think people are going to be coming here to really see that. Because again, I think that's an aspect that is fairly iconic to LA, kind of that the street sport in the LA version of it, whether it's the Undefeated, you know, the multiple sneaker shops on Melrose. There's such an opportunity to do something Kith, do something in a really cool, really inspirational way of just like showing your best foot forward. And I'm really excited to see all of the retail experiences for sure.
Yeah. Agreed. And then, to tie back to your like non-alcoholic thing, to like go back to that.
That's where I was going. Thought that was, yes.
So yeah, I mean, I mentioned in the letter recently this week about like Roland Garros banning alcohol after having such a rough open. Basically just drunk fans like yelling in the middle of games is like not fun for anyone. You know, I think after the World Cup when non-alcoholic, and it was like actually like people were like complaining about it, but then it went well. And so in the Stade this year, like it's the same model as Roland Garros, right? Like it would be like inside the stadium itself is no booze. So it's like a real opportunity for a non-alcoholic brand to like really that. I think I can't remember if my mom said it was Heineken this year that was really kind of owning it, but there was also a lot of Coca-Cola like products, obviously. But like, you know, like I think a non-alcoholic like it doesn't have to be beer. And I think actually in LA, you'll find that like beer is not as popular as it is in Europe. And so I think like seeing like how it might be more of a non-alcoholic cocktail kind of like moment is probably true for this games. Like I think there's definitely more consciousness around like not wanting to feel bloated and full and that comes with beer, right? Even non-alcoholic,
especially when it's going to be hot as fuck. Like I think water is going to be,
like hydrating beverages can have a big moment at this game.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. Like it's a big part of California culture, right? Is kind of just that health portion, and there's a lot of beverages involved in that, kind of the non-alcoholic category, but also, you know, whether it's CBD drinks or whether it's just like, you know, flavored waters or things like that. I think there's an opportunity for brands to come in and try something different.
Yeah. And I think there's a whole like opportunity to tap into kind of the wellness culture that is in LA. Like a while, like, gosh, now it is a while back. Like we worked on something. Oh my gosh, I'm forgetting. But we worked on a headphones brand, Beats. Was it Beats?
Yeah, we did Beats and Bows.
Beats, but I was like trying to think which one we did at the Olympics. It was Beats. And we did a whole activation. This was in Brazil, but it was like around it was for athletes after they had finished the games. Because like, so all the sports kind of happen at different points, right? So like some athletes, like they are there and they're kind of like waiting and prepping and like they're kind of doing their own thing because they're like, you know, in training land. But then there's the people that go early and then they're done, and they often hang out and stay for the like closing ceremony, right? Like they're not like shooting off. And so we did this whole like wellness thing around like, you know, it had like sound baths and like places for them to relax and like basically like athlete centers. And I think that could also be a really lovely way for brands to activate and feel very connected to LA. But I could also see it extending to the consumer of like these kinds of overwhelming events. Like, I mean, I'm thinking of like just going to Chicago and seeing Bluey. Like I was excited for that, and I had to take like a week to recover from that like onslaught of like sound, and like it was really overwhelming. So I think like experiences that help people kind of like wind down after kind of winding up could be also a really cool way for brands to activate.
Totally. And it makes me think of like the Nike stuff that we did with LeBron. Like there was a consumer centric version of that. And then there was kind of just an industry aspect of that. I think that's a huge opportunity. And then thinking about the beach thing that we did was a minute ago. And now social media with the athletes is so prevalent. Like if a brand really did something like that, it would be all over. I think that's such a huge opportunity. Like thinking about how you would really share that, you would really see that, really this experience. And I think it's really thinking about how does a brand needs to ask itself, like, how does it want to show up, right? What's the piece of the brand that it wants to activate, whether it's, you know, same thing with LA, like, what does it want to be known as? Does it want to share more of like, yeah, LA is really the centerpiece for this, or it's really about like bring out the iconic elements. Like, what does a brand really want to be known for and connect with? And then it's really digging into that piece. I think the wellness, the supporting athletes, and then the unwinding portion for so many brands that really focus on that could be amazing.
Yeah. And then to get to the athlete thing again, I think like what I felt like my takeaway from the athletes this year was that the appetite for different sports, like it had so much more to do with the personalities of these particular athletes, right? Like Ezra is one example, Alona is another, you know, like I think, but these sports aren't the mainstream sports, you know, like my mom was saying that if it's not clear, my parents went to the Olympics, so that's where I'm getting most of my information. But like, she was saying that like fencing was huge in France. Like it was like, she was like, it was everywhere. It was being broadcast everywhere because they had so many good athletes. So that's another thing is like looking at like, America has so many athletes. So you're going to have like a real swath in a different way than like, say, like, France, like they really compete well. Like they had a big team this year, but like they compete well in different areas, right? I think basketball will be enormous in LA, like enormous. But I think, you know, thinking through like picking and choosing like these different athletes and like not being afraid to be like supporting rugby. Like, I don't think that there were brands who were like, yay, rugby. Like, we should get a female rugby player. Like, it was
especially
like
women's rugby, especially women's. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, they were not on the radar. So I would say, like, in the lead up, like, you're going to be seeing all these trials. These athletes, like, they are content machines at this moment.
Yeah.
And so you can probably get a sense for who's coming, who will be young enough to be at the games next year. But then you'll also see like a year out when they're in their trials, like they've learned from this one, like they're not like these athletes are smart and they know that they need these careers. And so they want to build them. So they're going to be building these content machines like 2 years out, 1 year out at least. So you should start looking in these various sports. And like, I say like, go for some wilder sports. Like, I mean, who doesn't love Simone Biles, but like, we could also get away from gymnastics. Like, it doesn't all have to be gymnastics, right? Like, and I think she would say that too. Like, I think there's just so many cool athletes. And there was some like cool stuff where the athletes were like exchanging pins and like doing that. I think facilitating these relationships between athletes could be really fun. Like, the athletes were really leading the content. So I say like partnering directly, finding unique sports, finding ways to connect them and like develop their community that I think that they have and have more than ever because they're like now fangirling over one another, right? So there's like,
which is so awesome to see. Yeah.
Right. So cool. Like, and I think that it used to be more isolated and like, you know, the tennis people would be with the tennis people and the golf people are with the golf people or whatever. But like, I think that will be different next time or so. So I think there's another great opportunity there.
Totally. I totally agree. And I think it's getting in early. Like you can figure out now, like starting to get in and really support somebody in a different, that hasn't been heard of, that you just believe in their personality. And then I think with the content, like as we know, right, like support them in furthering like their vision of that content. Don't get too like, oh, it's got to be this way, or I want the brand showing this way. Just find the people that are right for your particular brand and then really support the hell out of them in getting there. I think that would be amazing to see.
I think another thing to talk about, to tie it back to another piece of the letter, I don't know if you read all of my little fun links, but one of them was about On, and On created like a clubhouse at the US Open this year. And it was basically, it wasn't even, from what I could tell, it wasn't necessarily professional athletes. It was like people who are great at playing tennis. So it's like a fan game, which I love. Like, I love the idea of including fans or like semi-pro people in their own sport, and like giving them the opportunity to show their love of the sport that they are so excited around. Like, that makes me think of what you were saying with like LA. Like, there's so many great skaters. Like, they're not Olympic skaters, but they're really amazing. And I think like that could be really cool. And I loved how they like then eventually just turned it into like a rave. And like that was fun too. You know, very European.
Yeah.
Not super Swiss, but the Swiss can party for sure.
For sure.
So I think that's another. I think fans of the sport, playing the sport and promoting it in a bigger way, as we've been seeing, like fan content creation, like if somebody puts out an album and then somebody makes a remix of it, and that remix becomes bigger than the actual album, and like people love to support like fan amplification. And I think that could be another cool way to like be different, to like not just be like the big athletes, but like the people who are just super fans of the sport and who are athletes themselves.
I think that's a great call. I think as we're talking about it, like that is what I'm most excited to see, is just the fringe, like that athlete you didn't know, or that sport that wasn't huge. Like it's a smaller, more particular play. But I think just like, you know, we see and we know that the fans of that particular sport are bringing out that personality. If you're a brand that's really doing that for the right reasons and the right way, and your brand really speaks to that, that's just going to like just go boom once somebody really hits, and people will really see that that's authentic, doing it for the right reasons. Like, I think that would be amazing to see, and such an opportunity in 4 years in LA that I'm just talking about it, I'm getting excited for it.
And then the very last thing I would say, because I have a lot to say about it, obviously, is one of the things that's very unique about LA is they have a huge Korean population. They have a huge Japanese population. They have, you know, like there's population, obviously Mexican people, but like from everywhere. This will be probably one of the games where people are supporting their home countries and they are from like those countries, way bigger than, you know, some other games. Like Paris is also very diverse. And I think you feel that, but I think that will be a really big thing. Like, I think that we will see like a lot of countries like being not just USA. I think it'll be, yes, Korea, and like South Korea will be like super big. And I think like there's another opportunity if you are one of those brands, like from those communities and from the like part of that nation. Like, I think that could be like those populations are centered often, and like there's a big opportunity, you know, to do something in Koreatown or Little Tokyo or something like that really like uplifts your own community. I think that could be also really amazing.
I love that. Yeah, such an opportunity. Amazing.
Let's learn about it.
Really excited.
Yes. Yeah. Me too. I can't wait. I've already booked, you know, my stay in your non-guest guest bedroom.
I mean, here we go. Let's do it. And I'm excited to talk to brands and get some things going.
Yes, let's do it. All right. Ciao.
All right. Well, happy early birthday.
Thank you.
Talk to you then. But we'll be a week off for this. And
yeah. See you on the 2-week mark, everyone else. I'm sure I'll talk to you on the 6th. Okay.
Of course.
All right.
All right.
Ciao.